All right, welcome everybody. This is our first Pathways to Adult Success solution forum of the new year. I guess we're all school folks at heart, so the year always starts in September. Today, we're going to be talking about opening doors to college for underrepresented students. And we're very excited. We're going to be hearing from our first set of Pathways to Adult Success Design Challenge participants. 3 of the 5 groups that participated in our design challenge last year to work on a critical problem of practice for their organization. And we have 3 of them here to share us today what they developed, what they learned, what they found, the challenges they faced, the solutions they developed that all collectively are helping to open doors to college for underrepresented students. All right, so Amanda, next slide. We're going to hear from our friends from, Arizona State, the Philadelphia Education Fund, and the Peer Power Foundation. Each one of them will have about a 10-minute presentation followed by about 5 minutes of Q&A. And then we'll have a little time at the end for an open discussion and resource sharing on this topic. Or if folks have any resources more broadly supporting pathways to adult success, that'll be a great time to share them. Next slide. As always, we have a diversity of folks on the call, and that diversity really strengthens and informs us all. So we ask you to actively participate by putting questions in the chat, sharing resources in the chat. And then, as I said, there will be time for Q&A after each of our presenters shares their learnings with us, as well as some discussion amongst all of us at the end. And just to set today's topic up, many of us were hoping that we would be talking fully about pandemic recovery now. We're all still sort of deeply in the middle of pandemic impact, unfortunately. And as we know that this is just continuing to this building disruption upon the disruption we already had, and really making uncertainty the norm. And when uncertainty is the norm, we're unfortunately learning, that breaks momentum. And we know that momentum is so essential to student success, to make that smooth transition from high school into post-secondary schooling or training. And anything that breaks that momentum really has significant and deep, long-lasting impacts. And that's why I'm really excited to be hearing from the folks we're hearing from today, because one thing that really, I think, unites them, as you'll see in a minute, is they've all reinvented sort of standard processes and sort of standard things we do, and found ways to reinvent them to make them more adaptive to the moment. And in learning to make it more adaptive to the moment, I think making it a stronger and better practice in general. So that's really the theme for the day. And just, to hammer the importance of this, that as we all know, we're unfortunately learning, there has been significant disruption of the momentum of the progression of kids from high school to post-secondary due to the pandemic. And it has hit underrepresented and underserved students the most. It's really at our community colleges that some of the enrollment declines have been furthest hit, and that is the gateway to opportunity for so many first-generation students. And we even know that within that, males in particular, men in particular, have been feeling a lot of that, and that has all sorts of long-term implications. So, with that frame for us to begin, let's get to it. Let's learn from our past design participants and begin with our friends from the Arizona State University on virtual college application and Fafsa support from Sylvia Symonds and Erin Chastain. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Bob. Well, for us, it's still good morning, but I imagine for many of you, it's good afternoon. It's great to see everyone. Thank you. We're so grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit about our project. So we are here to talk about virtual college application Fafsa support. As Bob mentioned, my name is Sylvia Symonds, and I'm with Arizona State University and specifically Access ASU. And I will turn it over to my co-presenter to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Chastain. I'm also here with Arizona State University and really excited to be here with you all today to share about the work we've done this past year plus.
So for a long time, ASU has worked with community partners including other post-secondary institutions, K-12, college access organizations, and other organizations in our community to advance students' post-secondary pathways. And we do that through a variety of ways, but certainly a big part of our work includes providing support for students to complete their college applications and to complete their Fafsas. And so even though there was a pandemic, there was still a need within our community to help students complete these processes so that they would be able to take the next step and fulfill their higher education goals. So, in the midst of the pandemic, in September of 2020, we worked with our K-12 partners to host a number of virtual events, similar to many of the events that probably happened in your communities as well. So we hosted college application events in September over Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams. We did similar events for Fafsa in October of 2020, also through those online platforms. And we used an online mode because similar to probably many schools in your community, our schools were entirely virtual through March of 15, March 15th of 2021. Many of our schools, some of our schools were in person, but even those that were in person were not really allowing many visitors to come to their campuses. So virtual support seemed to be the way to go in September and October. But one thing we were seeing was that once November hit, participation in those events cratered. Schools were continuing to host different events online, and where events in September and October had seen dozens of students participating, sometimes hundreds of students on a given Zoom. In November, we were seeing 5 students log in or 10 students. And so we knew, as a community, that those online events were no longer really meeting the needs of our students and families. So we wanted to think through what would be another way in which we could support those students, support families. We know that Fafsa can be an intimidating process. There are a lot of real and perceived barriers about paying for college. And, for some, Fafsa is an unknown. And even for those who are aware of Fafsa, it can be a daunting process for many. So we wanted to meet families where they are comfortable. We were also very concerned about, the pandemic and the impact that it was going to have on Fafsa completion in our state. So we did some brainstorming and were able to work together to come up with some virtual drive-in events to help support our community. So we have a very brief video that we wanted to share with you that would give you a bird's eye view into what these events look like.
For many, the dream of going to college is just that, a fantasy without some financial aid. But less than half of Arizona students completed their Fafsa in 2019, putting our state below the national average. And the pandemic likely means that number will drop even further. The Rebound Arizona's Megan Thompson in Phoenix with a group of education leaders offering a drive-through event to make this dream a financial reality.
Steering you away from confusion and getting you back on track for success, all from your car.
We had our first event in November at Camelback High School, and now this is our 4th event.
Sylvia Symonds is with ASU, and her job is to reach out to students about what's possible for them through education. The free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA, is hard enough to navigate sometimes, and the pandemic made her job even more difficult.
We noticed that a group in Mississippi was hosting a FAFSA drive-in, so we thought that was a really creative idea.
They reached out and used their conversations to create events like these here in Arizona.
A family will drive in We ask them what they need help with, and then we ask them if they prefer English or Spanish.
They can log on to free Wi-Fi, use devices, access printers, and have staff walk them through the entire process from start to finish.
Finally, I'm so relieved because it's so stressful.
Bianca Ruiz and her mom Sonia free from the frustration. Now Bianca can focus on her goal of going to college to become a nurse, making mom very proud.
She got good grades and she's a good student, and I hope she's gonna make it.
We hope so too.
For many, the dream of
So, that video gives you just a quick peek into what the events look like. They were held, in different parts of our community, many times at different high schools, because we knew that's where families and students are very comfortable. And, families would just drive in and we would ask them if they would like support in English or Spanish. We had volunteers from several community organizations, including other post-secondary partners, the Be a Leader Foundation, College Success Arizona, and just really a community event. We want to give credit where credit is due, and we were very grateful, to the National College Attainment Network for bringing us together and highlighting the group in Mississippi that was, doing this innovative work, and that really spurred us on into figuring out how this solution might be applicable in our community.
And so I'm sure you guys have been seeing, these are photos from all of our different events. And it's definitely giving me, I'm reminiscing, looking back at all of us that were there that came together. So a few points of pride that we really wanted to share is we ended up hosting 12 drive-in events in total, all across the valley. As you all know, Phoenix is a very large, if not one of the largest cities in the country. So we knew we had to do different locations to meet our students and families where they were. And doing this, we partnered with many different, you can see, school districts, different cities and community organizations to help us figure out the best locations for these events. All in all, we had about over 800 attendees. This includes students and their parents. And one also thing too, we know, right, that's population of our students need to sign their signature pages. And we made it one of our goals that we wouldn't let them drive away without having that completed. So we had everything in-house. Students were able to print, and then we had pre-filled out envelopes and stamps, and we went and mailed our signature pages out for our students. So at the end of the day, when they left, we knew that they were complete and nothing would be held up on our end from the event. Other communities that were planning drive-ins also throughout this time, Yuma and Flagstaff, which are both Arizona, and then West Virginia. We actually had a student from West Virginia reach out to us and say, oh, we saw an article or saw a quick video on what you're doing, and I think this would be great for my community, so can we meet? So our colleague from Education Forward met with her, so we thought that was really great too, to see the innovation of current students realizing this need for their own schools. And then really relied on local media coverage. You all saw the clip from ABC 15, but Univision was a huge supportive partner of ours, and showcased every single event. Radio, PBS, this was really, I will say, how we got majority of our folks. Yes, we had registration and signups, but a lot of times it would be mom, dad, or student. Oh, I just heard this on the radio. So I grabbed my documents and I showed up. So those are some great points of pride for us. And just for you all, we will share resources at the end. But we did a lot of prep work. So our volunteers who came were ready to go, but we had about 179 total volunteers, 28 different organizations who came together to support this. Just a few were on the previous slide. And we logged about 716 volunteer hours. So a lot of work. This was a huge team effort. Yeah, want to always thank our partners who were out there with us. So everybody before the event got a training video. We met with them virtually. If they had any questions, we followed, COVID protocols. And so we really stuck to that. But just so you guys can visualize kind of how it went, we had a check-in person, student and family rolled up. We asked if they had an appointment or not, and then directed them also on preferred language, English or Spanish, and got them to their tent. Sometimes they were there 30 minutes, sometimes they were for 2 hours, but we got them through the entire process, FSAID, all the way to FAFSA completion at some times. And then if for some reason we couldn't get everything done, we would schedule a follow-up one-on-one appointment with those families. And a few things we learned, cross collaboration and promotion of these events across the districts were key. We had students from all over. It didn't matter if it was in a Phoenix Union or a Mesa, all over the state, we had students coming. Incentives were not always needed to get families to these events. We had incentives, but families were like, oh, that's wonderful. I appreciate the gift card, but I was going to come anyways to do it. So meeting families where they are also is key. Like we said, we really partnered and were strategic on where we hosted these events to make it less of a drive and commute for our families. And documenting and obviously sharing out our processes is really important. And we've put together a resource folder and an entire presentation resource drive on how to host your own event if you or anyone is interested. And we'll say we are already in talks to plan and schedule at least 3 to 4 regional ones this year. So they are definitely continuing and would love to answer any questions or share out anything you guys might want to hear more on.
Yeah, so please ask questions in chat or share resources. I'll start things off. One thing that is striking that to you probably doesn't seem striking, but that this is Arizona State going out to get the students to do the FAFSA form, right? It's not the high school, right? And that's typically, not always, but it's seen as the high school counselor's job to get those forms, help families get those forms done. In this case, it's the university reaching into the community. So do you want to just talk a little bit about when that shift happened or how long that's been going on or what led to it that sort of flipped the perspective of who should be reaching out to the students to get the forms completed?
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob, for that question. So, Erin and I are part of a unit at ASU called Access ASU, and our mission is to increase the number of Arizona students prepared to enroll and succeed in higher education. And so our work has been a part of the ASU community for more than 15 years. We have partnered with local school districts, community partners, post-secondary partners, because we are deeply committed to our statewide goal of achieving a 60% post-secondary attainment for adults aged 24 and above. And we know it's going to take a community. We know that these conversations need to start early. So the work of our team, we work with students, with families, with schools. And in Arizona, we have one of the highest student to counselor ratios in the country at 905 to 1.
Wow.
And so we know it's too much to expect our school counselors and our schools to go this alone. And we are very fortunate to have a community of partners that are also deeply invested in the future of Arizona students. And so we work together very collaboratively. And I will say even more so during the pandemic, because we know the need was even greater during that time to really support students, support families, support educators, because it's going to take all of us to really turn the tide and make sure that students have the support that they need to achieve their higher education goals.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question for our presenters or a thought to share? I mean, the other thing that I said is striking, right, is that you had sort of a traditional process, and then you said, well, let's make it virtual, and it sort of fell flat. And then you had to sort of reinvent it, right? Like, was it just simply seeing the Mississippi example that led to the aha? Were you searching for many different ideas on how to do it? How did that come about?
I think, pivot was really a word, probably all of us heard multiple times last year. And, so the first pivot was to virtual. And, Erin, can speak to some of those events that we had, and they were successful in September and October. But then at a certain point, they just weren't meeting the needs because we saw attendance flatten out completely. And so then we thought, okay, so now what? They're not going to meet us on Zoom, on Teams, or on WebEx. So what happens now? And especially when we can't just do our normal, event, in the media center or in the library, that's not going to work because we can't be in schools because it's not safe. So what now? And that really led us to, get together with our community partners and problem solve and strategize. And somebody said, hey, remember that presentation we were all in? Maybe we should go talk to those folks, get to college in Mississippi and hear more about their drive-in.
Thank you. And just to follow up, we have a question. Go ahead.
So we have a question from Shanitra. How did you approach the other community partners? And I'll also say that Brad has expressed appreciation for the way everybody came together to own this Fafsa issue that tends to be dropped through the cracks. So how did you approach the other community partners?
Looking back, really, it was a learning moment for us. The very first one we hosted, outside of this little mini, almost kind of internal task force that we created with our go-tos of be a leader and education forward, we didn't really include anybody outside of that. And then once we were at the school site, we thought, oh yeah, we should actually really include the school in the planning because then we'll get more buy-in, across the board. So then after that, the fact that we could show, here's what we did, here's how many students came, it became really easy. And we had really no shame because we knew this was such a good event, an opportunity for our students. We just went and, said, hey, City of Mesa, we did this one event in Phoenix. You want to have, friendly competition of, do you also want to host one? But then, it became really easy. It kind of snowballed of once you had one person say yes, or a mayor sign on of yes, absolutely, I'd love to be there. Mayor Giles from Mesa was in attendance. People even, I would say, almost started reaching out to us of we would love to host another one, or we would love to host one in our district. So I think once we had one and it went really well, it was very, very easy to get other partners on board. And agreed, it was very, very collaborative. There was not one person or organization more invested or less invested. I think this weirdly was one of the most perfect group projects that I've ever been a part of. And everybody really worked, I think, together to say, hey, we need to support our students and our counselors in our schools who are doing a lot. What can we do? What can we do for them?
Great. Thank you. All right, so we're going to turn on to our second group now. And we'll come back to Maria's question in the close. But I want to move us ahead now to our friends from the Philadelphia Education Fund and creating a Pathways to Adult Success Informed Post-Secondary Fair Toolkit. And we're going to hear from Rick and Kelly. On to you.
Thank you, Bob. My name is Rick Moses, and I am the director for the Philadelphia Post-Secondary Success Program here at the Philadelphia Education Fund. And Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Kelly Staskel, and I am the Senior Program Manager for the Philadelphia Post-Secondary Fund at the Philadelphia Education Fund.
So Kelly and I are with the Ed Fund, and the Ed Fund in Philadelphia for over 30 years has been working to build pathways to college and career success for those that are underserved in the Philadelphia area. And we do that in a number of ways. And PPSP, the Philadelphia Post-Secondary Success Program that I referred to, that we're responsible for, that we refer to as PPSP, is one of those avenues that the Ed Fund uses to accomplish that. And so, we've been fortunate for over 10 years to be supported by Chubb to do this work through PPSP. And the goal or the focus of PPSP is really to work from a systems approach around convening and bringing together the leadership of the schools, the high schools that we work in, along with their college and career staff and partners to help them to develop a sustainable college-going culture that helps to deliver and support, that helps to deliver college and career supports equitably across the school from 9th through 12th grade so that students are being touched and supported, not just those students that sign up for a particular program, but all students in a particular grade. And the way we do that is we convene these teams in the schools. We call them a post-secondary team. And we work with them to help them to develop an area, a priority of focus. And one of those areas that actually is across all 4 schools, one of the priority areas of focus is early awareness. And that's the idea of introducing college and career to the 9th grade. So with that, our approach, when Bob mentioned earlier, we use the design challenge to focus on a problem of practice or an area of focus, not so much from the pandemic and the virtual component, but we did have to shift to make it happen virtually, which we were successful in doing that. But really the design challenge gave us an opportunity to develop a toolkit that Kelly and I are going to walk you through very briefly that we use to work with. We had been doing what we call college fairs or college forums focused on the 9th grade. And so the design challenge gave us an opportunity to develop this toolkit to infuse the ABCs, attendance, behavior, and coursework, those predictors of high school graduation and success through past research. And so what we've done is we've taken that information, we've developed this toolkit to formalize how we work with those partners. And when I'm talking about partners, I'm talking about the recruiters that we have and from various trades and so forth that come in and talk to the students about those opportunities, with the idea that they would not only talk about what the opportunities are that are available to them, but also the importance of focusing on attendance, behavior, and grades. And hearing it from them, we think adds a lot of value as opposed to the normal course of hearing from teachers and parents and so forth. So the tool that we're going to walk you through or the slide deck that we're going to walk you through is the toolkit that we use to help inform the recruiters about how they can do this. We also, as part of this, we have what we call a passport that that the students, it's an activity, once the students have heard from the different presenters, for them to develop goals based on what they've heard, particularly focused around the ABCs. And then we also have some surveys that we ask the students and the presenters to fill out, so that will help inform how we continue to develop this. Because this is a pilot program. We introduced it in 2 of our schools last year. We're looking to expand it to our other schools next year. So with that, that's sort of the context and the backdrop of what we're doing. And so Kelly is going to begin to walk us through the slide deck that we use when we're talking with recruiters. And we're going to do it pretty quickly because we don't have a lot of time. So Kelly?
Sure. So we start out with the context and what we call the big why. So at this point in the presentation, we like to illustrate the ideas that Rick just outlined by asking our recruiters to imagine they're a 12th grader who attends a college information session only to learn that their GPA puts their dream school out of reach. We can all really feel that sense of disappointment and uncertainty. So then we ask them to imagine instead that they're a 9th grader inspired by a college information session to use those next 4 years to obtain the GPA required by their dream school. The recruiters that we've spoken to are excited to be a part of that sort of aha moment that empowers students to work towards their informed goals. And all of this serves to emphasize the potential that these information sessions have, not only to expose students to college and career options, but to emphasize the steps that they can take now in order for those options to be available to them by the time they're high school seniors. We also use this slide to talk with our recruiters about why it's important to tailor college and career information sessions specifically for a 9th grade audience, as opposed to simply inviting them to information sessions already offered to the 11th and 12th graders in the building. We know 11th and 12th grade sessions often hone in on the details of the financial aid and application process, because students, of course, need that information session, but present that to a 9th grader. And I think we can all anticipate those kind of glazed over blank stares. At best, students tune out, and at worst, they could leave thinking, wow, college is boring and arduous. That's not something that sounds appealing to me. So these 9th grade sessions really need to speak to a 9th grade audience specifically to be effective. So I'll transition back over to Rick.
So the next 2 slides really sort of highlight why recruiters. And as I mentioned earlier, that the students are likely to hear from teachers and counselors and parents. So we go to the next slide, and I'm not going to go into the detail because of the time frame that we do when we're walking this through the recruiters. But the big point here is that recruiters are the decision makers. They're the gatekeepers. So we felt like this information would be heard with a different ear, because these are the people that are going to make a decision as to whether you're going to gain entrance into their programs. So we sort of go into a little bit of detail with that. And then Kelly, if you want to move to we try to highlight some of the benefits that we think about. And if you can go back to the next slide quickly. So if you go down to the 3rd bullet, we like to think about, by opening the door in 9th grade, there's an opportunity to facilitate a strong relationship, hopefully over the years. And by that, we would hope that there would be, an increase in persistence and increasing retention, which is a win-win for everybody. Obviously, that's the ultimate goal. And so then if we go to the next slide, which highlights a little more about the benefits, we like to think about the last paragraph there, the last bullet, where we like to think that we're creating a richer environment through diversity of the background that these students are bringing, because the population that we work with in the city is extremely diverse. So we like to think that there's a benefit there into the universities and organizations that are looking to work with our students. And if we move that, so then, Kelly sort of referenced this earlier, but, it's the benefits I think were clear, but also, we know that engaging the 9th graders, it's post-secondary recruiters, it requires a different approach than one that's geared normally to the 11th and 12th grades. So if we move to why the ABCs, this is something that I mentioned earlier from the research through PATH has shown, actually, if we go to the next slide, I think what outlines here is you'll see, you can see research out of Chicago showed that students who are ABC on track by the end of 9th grade are 4 times more likely to graduate. So, we look to this information, and that guided our thinking in terms of when we were trying to design this, what would be something that we could come up with that would really be impactful in terms of these fairs. And I keep saying fairs because that's how we started, but we really are changing that name to forums as opposed to fairs. So, Kelly, you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah,
Kelly's
so
going to walk us through the definitions.
Yeah, so from here, we cover the definitions and strategies of the ABCs so that our recruiters can really have actionable conversations with our 9th graders. And these are suggestions so our recruiters don't have to pull from scratch, but we also emphasize that, we're by no means dictating their content or asking them to create something new, which is important because we're trying to create buy-in with the recruiters. So to that end, we try to make sure that these are relevant to and align with the information that they would already be presenting. Most of all, they're designed to ensure that this is not just a presentation of information, but more so a discussion around it. So I, of course, won't go through all of these, but we can absolutely make this available if anyone would like to use it. And I'll close by speaking about the final part of the presentation, where we talk about the fact that for students to commit to sustained action around this message, it is important that they can connect the ABCs to a future that they can envision for themselves. Like Rick said, we use goal setting activities to close all of our 9th grade early awareness events, not just this year since we infused the ABCs, but before that as well. And we found that across the board, students with an interest in a really specific college or career wrote more precise and ambitious goals for themselves than do their peers who are less certain about what their future holds. And it doesn't matter whether the student's interested in pursuing an engineering or doctoral degree, or if they're interested in beauty of the performing arts, as long as they have a specific goal, it allows them to see what they're working towards. It provides a purpose. So with that in mind, we ask our recruiters to really highlight with some some topics like student activities, campus traditions, perks, study abroad opportunities, anything that enables students to imagine with some specificity and enthusiasm the possible futures they can choose from. Not that they have to know what they want to do, but that they know what's out there. And you'd be amazed, or perhaps not, how many students' takeaways include a mention of these perks like free movie passes or transit passes, you know, and it sticks with them, and that's the goal. It emphasizes that college is an experience in and of itself and not just a stepping stone. And we want students to leave these events realizing that. So I'll stop sharing here.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And again, if you have questions or comments, please share them in the chat. We've already had several requests for the PowerPoint, and we'll definitely make sure everybody gets that. I'll kick it off. A similar question, like, again, recruiters have been coming to schools forever. There's been the college fair forever. It's a very routine part of school. What was the aha moment that said, wait, let's have them stop and talk to ninth graders?
Actually, that started a while ago with PPSP. Was as part of PPSP, we work with the schools, as I mentioned, to identify areas of priority. And so we take them through an asset mapping to identify where they might need support. And the aha moment in the data that was collected there was that, wait a minute, we're working with 11th and 12th graders around this information. We're not doing anything with the ninth grade. And it was a way of introducing this concept to the ninth grade without adding additional work to everybody's plate. That's a key with part of our work, that we're not, people are so overwhelmed in the buildings. We try to look for, when I said systems approach, where is there something in the building that we can help them align in a way that is doable, is the word that I always use. So that was the aha moment when they identified early on, they wanted to do something with the ninth grade, and they looked and they said, wait a minute, we've got this going on in the 11th and 12th grade. We already have the resource partners here. Let's ask them to come into the ninth grade to infuse that. And it's looked different ways over the years. Your design challenge allowed us to sort of, develop this approach. But that was the aha moment, looking at, we have this need, how are we going to do it? We've got this resource in the building. It's not going to create additional work. There's not additional resources. So it's something that can be sustainable, which is the overall goal. So that was how that came about.
Yeah. And what I think is also really powerful, right, is that this idea of like sort of actuating like ninth graders' excitement over a specific school or program, but also what it takes to get there, right? Because we know that getting decent grades in challenging classes is like the best preparation for post-secondary success. But that you have to work for that. And if you don't know what you're working for, it's much harder to inspire that. So I think making that real connection to like a person and a place, I think is a lot of the power. And my last question, I'm wondering, and I know it's just beginning, but what has been the impact on the recruiters? Has this changed their outlook about the kids in the building, because kids in ninth grade are a much more diverse group. It might be coming to them in 11th and 12th grade at their booth, right, to say, how do I apply? Give me an application to your school.
Well, I think as you said, it's early, but one of the things that we did get back with the surveys was that they really did, from going through this process, this training, if you will, that we use through this tool, is that they really did see the value and appreciate the value of bringing this to the ninth grade, because they hadn't really necessarily been thinking about that. So that's what we've seen early on. What we'd like to hope is that this will be something that they will continue to do without just our prodding, would be a goal. But one of the things that we tried to do is make sure, and we were clear with them, was like, listen, we're not telling you to rewrite what you're already doing. We're not trying to add additional work. So this tool, they did appreciate, laid things out in a pretty simplistic way on how they can think about the ABCs and infuse that into what they're already doing without a heavy lift. So that's what we're hearing so far. Kelly, I don't know, is there anything you would want to add to that?
Yeah, the recruiters we spoke to, I think, really appreciated having an opportunity to speak with students in a less, sort of formal capacity when, like I mentioned, with 11th and 12th grade, there's information that they have to go over. But having this opportunity to speak with ninth graders, they're sort of able to connect on a more personal level, and the recruiters seem to really enjoy that.
Thank you, thank you. And we'll have a little time for more questioning at the end. And we've already shared a link to the toolkit in the chat. And now I'd like to bring on our third presenters from Peer Power Foundation.
Hi there.
Mary Grace, Chris, and Sarah.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Mary Grace Hemme, and I'm the Director of Learning and Development at Peer Power. And we're based in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to pause for a moment here to allow my colleagues, Sarah and Chris, to introduce themselves.
Yes, I do. Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Sarah Benson. I'm one of the program directors for our program here. I'm actually running the program at one of our partner high schools and middle schools.
Hey everyone, my name is Chris Zah, and I'm the Vice President of the Peer Power Institute, which is an institute based out of the University of Memphis, working in conjunctions with Peer Power Foundation on the University of Memphis side to instill and inform our outcomes and even a policy space as well for local state governments.
Thank you, guys. So for our design challenge, we created virtual programs to promote access to college readiness resources during the pandemic. And I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about our approach. So for about the past 17 years, our mission has been to inspire and empower student success through a peer-to-peer model. So that in that peer-to-peer model, we hire college students and recent graduates to work as tutors and mentors in the classroom. And basically right now we're in 10 Shelby County schools, 9 high schools, and 1 middle school. And our programs are integrated into school culture, and our success coaches, which is what we call our tutors and mentors, are embedded in the classroom. So to accomplish this, we partner with principals to develop a plan with the district and the principal to identify opportunities for growth, adopt school expectations, and establish clear and consistent communication. We team with teachers to teach with them. So we reduce the average student to adult ratio in classrooms to provide support for academic content delivery, and of course, testing subjects and ACT-related topics. We attend PLC meetings to enhance academic intervention initiatives as well. And then, of course, we serve the students. So our tutors work in academics. We mentor students on the higher education experience. We build programming to reinforce academic and social development. And basically the virtual programs that we developed during the pandemic were an ACT Prep University program, a U of M Connect program to replace the more traditional college campus tour. And then also we worked with an after-school virtual learning lab and a College 101 college coaching program. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sarah Benson to talk a little bit about our programs.
Thank you. We can get to the next slide. So one of our programs that we created through the course of last year was our virtual learning lab. This was a free after-school program that we offered to all students across the state of Tennessee. And so this program occurred every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday from September to November. We had 2 sessions a day, so students were able to pick what day they wanted to come and what session. And so those sessions were from 3:30 to 5, and then 5 to 6:30 during the week. And on Saturdays, they could choose to come between 9:30 and 11, and 11 and 12:30 p.m. And so our focus during this time was they could either get support in 9th or 10th grade English, Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, geometry, and we also had our own ACT Prep and College Readiness course. And so once again, students were able to choose what day, what time, and what area that they would like to get help in during that time. And then the other program that we got to lead was our after school college 101. Well, our after school, well, college 101 is the name. Sorry, I cannot talk today. This was bi-weekly sessions in which we met with seniors to pretty much break down the college admissions process. And so what we found was that a lot of our seniors, because for many of them, the year before, the school year was stopped in about March. So the times where, because of the pandemic, where they would have started getting the information to prepare for college, that kind of got pushed to a side. So we started having these sessions with our seniors to kind of break down that process. So everything from finding the right college major to how to pick the right college and campus life. We also looked at scholarships and financial aid. So really breaking down the difference between a scholarship, a grant, and student loans. We got into campus life and student involvement opportunities. And so we also allowed the students to ask questions. And so if there was a topic that they really wanted more information on, we created resources to give out to them as well.
So to replace kind of the more traditional college tour that often happens, you wanted our students to have the ability to still get a feel for the University of Memphis. So we created the U of M Connect virtual version of that so that our students could get an idea of what's offered by the University of Memphis. And basically customize a tour for them based on their interests. So basically helping them to think through the realities of being a college student, addressing challenges or concerns students might have either during the application process or about college in general, expose high school seniors to student organizations on campus, faculty from various majors and admissions, and financial aid representatives. So we actually had those folks available virtually on a webinar call so that they could answer questions. And then also to address COVID concerns from potential students, because of how sort of the process was going to look and the differences that might be occurring due to the circumstances of the pandemic. And then also are offering our ACT program to help students be able to access that virtually. We turned it into a fully virtual program where students were able to access videos online that were released each week. And then we had Saturday sessions where they were meeting online virtually for a few hours to go over that content that they learned through the videos. So basically, we took from that the program that we had already been using and turned it into a virtual version of that program. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris now to talk a little bit about our results and the data that we were able to gather.
Thanks, Sarah and Mary Grace. Yeah, just to speak to the data portions of all our programming, this is actually turning out to be a pretty robust data set. We've, in the beginning, we thought we would just rely on survey data to see, how the students were progressing through some of these programmings, really just taking the climate of, are these programmings even useful, right? And that was the big question, right? But then, it kind of followed up with the interests of the school district, with SES in particular, engaging us about these programs in particular. And so we worked out a data user agreement to get some more data for our participants for all various programs. And they're just as curious as we are to see what worked and what didn't work, because I think they're trying to figure out, as many school districts are, what is the right mix of virtual, non-virtual, in this space where we have no clue if we're going to make the flip tomorrow, right? In some of our schools, between virtual or not. And so we sent out surveys to all participants for all three programs: Virtual Learning Lab, UM Connect, ACT Prep University. About 981 surveys were sent out, and this was post-program participation through SurveyMonkey. Had about 24 questions about the program itself, college admissions, scholarship, financial aid, and in particular how COVID has affected them in their academics in particular. We got 379 responses from that. We took those, we took the participants from all three programs, submitted the applicable students that were within Shelby County Schools as well, and they sent back some information to see if we could decipher if anything was affected. They gave us attendance data, formative testing data, end of course data, some ACT data. We also have a relationship with Ankura ACT where students can submit their scores directly to Peer Power. So use a little bit of a combined data set there, and then some disciplinary data. I will go ahead and mention we did not see any movement in disciplinary data at all. I feel as if last year was an odd year for disciplinary actions. How do you begin to take disciplinary actions to students that just are virtual, right, outside of not showing up to class? So I just omitted it from our key findings as well. But jumping into some surface level key findings that we found, right? And let me start with the virtual learning lab. What we did find was the students that did participate in virtual learning lab had an average, a higher increased average school attendance rate. We saw an increase in FAFSA completion rates. What we did not find is any significant impact on academic achievement as measured by student grades on a monthly basis, formative testing, and end of score exams. And we kind of thought as we were developing the program that academics would be a stretch to stand up a program in October and September, October, November, and try to see this grand results at the end of May or June. But we saw no real movement there, at least as it pertains to our virtual learning lab program. As far as college one-on-one participants, again, what's consistent here is the FAFSA completion rates. We're trying to verify at the moment post-secondary enrollment rates. We have a preliminary data set that was provided to us by the district, but we're still working on that on the university side to verify some of the post-secondary enrollment rates. So should have that soon. And I'll go over general interpretations here in a bit. And for ACT Prep universities, we did see an increase in composite score as standard. However, to the degree of in-person programming, it was not as high. So I found that very interesting, right? And I think this is maybe a bit intuitive. Again, we saw an increase in FAFSA completion rate. I thought this was interesting. There was a higher concentration on the TN Hope Lottery scholarship attainment score, which is a 21 on the ACT here in the state of Tennessee. So we saw that concentration shoot up very high post-programming relative to past years in person and virtual. I thought that was very, very interesting, a very interesting stat. And then finally, we just had a plethora of questions from students and parents in comparison to previous years. I know these are, again, very surface level findings, but it leads me to just kind of think about some interpretation here. Thinking about last year and what COVID did to students, in my mind, it seems like access to information was stripped, right, across the board. And I think we're seeing some of the key findings here, a result of that, right? With the increased questioning, a lot of the time spent in a lot of this programming was just a lot around conversations between a success coach and a student about just general life things in college. Hey, what is it like to be a chemistry major? Are you still eating during the pandemic, right? We would get emails from ACT Prep University parents asking, hey, we heard that colleges are waiving ACT scores. Do we not have to take it anymore, right? So a lot of misnomers about, certain things. While it might be true that they're waiving scores, scores are still very important to college financing and scholarships. So a lot of drops in information that parents and students weren't getting, in particular with the FAFSA completion too. And we saw, with Arizona State's and their successes with the FAFSA, just a lot of questions around FAFSA completions and how to go through that process. I think in the past, when everything was in person, you had a friend or you had a teacher that you could go to real quick and ask about. Those opportunities aren't as available as the pandemic and virtual setting are playing out. And I think you see students, grade school students in particular, really grasping on any resource for a source of information. And I think for me, that's the biggest takeaway was students, we have to be cognizant of the resources we're taking away when we do flip into a virtual setting, the access of information and how that flows, because it's not as straightforward and it's not as transparent as we think. And students are not telling us when they're not getting the appropriate information because they don't know, right? They just don't know. And so I look at these results and that's kind of my biggest takeaway after discussing with Dr. Mary Grace and Dr. Sarah here and team. We do have some next steps in our findings here. I would love to break down some of these statistics by grade levels and demographics to see if there was any matriculations and marginal differences. And that's kind of our next step here as we're going through this school year. I will say we've started our first round of AC Prep University for this school year. We have another massive round of 523 participants. So I think we're seeing a very consistent, the results are very consistent from what the pandemic years. I think, again, we're seeing a lot of students just looking for access to information one way or another that can help them move to either the college setting or step towards that goal. But I'm going to throw it back to Dr. Sarah for any questions.
We created a few prompting questions of our own for other programs, but if anybody has any questions, we would definitely love to hear from you guys as well.
Yeah, please share questions in the chat. I'll start with one. One of the themes we had throughout the presentation was this idea of reinventing standard processes. And you had to reinvent, you had sort of a integrated effort and you had to sort of reinvent multiple components of that integrated effort. So just a quick reflection on, were there parts of that were harder to turn virtual than others? Was there a key thing you think was enhanced and a key thing that maybe was missing by that pivot?
Yeah, I'll tackle it twofold, and then Sarah, I'm going to throw it to you with the virtual learning lab. I think one of the biggest takeaways that was enhanced was our AC Prep content development, right? Taking that content and developing it into a setting where students can digest it on their own time. And that's a big factor there, right? Because there is research coming out on Zoom fatigue and showing that students are not performing well in a virtual setting because of this idea of fatigue, right? So I think in my mind, that was a huge success. And I think the demand for it is speaking for itself. Now, there were some really difficult moments when it came to virtual learning lab, because we stand up that program closer towards the winter break. And so it was really the motivation aspect of pulling teeth to get students to participate and come. That was really difficult, but I'm going to throw it to Sarah because she was directing that program and she can speak a little bit more to it.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think the biggest takeaway from virtual learning lab, that although it was a great idea, so it's like, hey, we have this free program, you just log on, you pick what time. We found that many of our students by 3:30 were just not interested in logging back on, because for most of them, they've been online all day. And so it was a little bit harder getting participation for that. We did see most of our students would choose Saturdays as a day to log on to the virtual learning lab, but during the week, it was really hard. And so we definitely had to come up with incentives and things to get more participation. So we were doing raffles for gift cards, just anything we could think of to get students to come. But for the most part, and I think other programs have probably saw, by 3:30, 5 o'clock, many students are like, no, I'm just checking out for the computer for the day. So that was probably one of the biggest things that probably came from out of that. Yeah.
I think also that we, from that experience with the virtual learning lab, many of the students were asking more personal questions about their own situations and about their college pathway. And so that's one of the reasons why during kind of the second semester of last year, we pivoted to focusing more on ACT prep and to focusing more on things like College 101 and those sorts of opportunities that could give a more personalized approach to the college pathway.
Absolutely. And to note, College 101 was a program that we actually did during the school day. And so we definitely got a little bit more participation because it was something that we offered during school versus them having to log on after school to get this information.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we look forward to learning more as you learn more. I'm just going to bring us home here. If we go back to the slides. As always, we'll share the PowerPoint and the resources from the session today. I want to make folks aware, these were our inaugural design challenge participants, 3 of the 5. The invitation for 2021-22 is a week away. So if this rose your interest about these design challenges and the ideas they spark, we encourage you to stay tuned for the announcements coming out next week on how to participate in this coming year's design challenge. And just to remind you to save the dates that our next past solution forums are there for you to look at. We have October, November, and December. And we look forward to seeing folks there and continuing the conversation and continuing to share and learn with each other through these continuing to be challenging times. So with that, I just want to say thank you, be well, and onward. And we really thank the groups today for sharing their wisdom and their learnings and their challenges and their successes, and really showing how like there are things in front of us that are standard processes with a little reinvention suddenly go a lot further. And that should really be a source of innovation to all of us, right? That there are sometimes those small little rethinkings can have major impacts. And with that, thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.